right?
Yeah. But yeah, so my cousin, they bought that place. And
When it was the bar.
no, yeah, the goalpost.
Yeah, my buddy bought the license and took it to the pizza joint out past Gettysburg on the Fairfield Road. I forget.
That's out
Clementine, something like that.
Now they put another donut shop there on the square of Abbottstown. Did you see that?
Yes, I haven't been in there yet. Brews and Chews or Crumbs and Coffee, I don't know what it's called. So your cousin owns this New Horizon? They're Mennonites?
Brethren. Yeah, so you probably see all the girls.
It's 6 o'clock.
One night we need to start on time.
I told all my friends to bring popcorn and watch the show.
Yeah.
I told them it's going to be good. I was expecting more.
Yeah, I know.
Who's the zoning officer now?
Robert Smith resigned, retired.
It was John. I was there with John. How was his name?
He's retired, and I can't think of why. Last time. I know. Last time I covered you.
Yeah, and Robert.
Yes, and now it's she just started.
Got promoted.
Yeah, got promoted. Just started as a, I guess, yeah, third together.
There he is.
Supposed to run through the sign.
I was wondering.
I like that. Whenever you catch your breath, we're going.
Ready in less than 5 minutes.
Ready? Ready? Yep. Ready?
Do it.
Yep.
Good evening. We don't have mics, so we're going to do a lot of yelling. We're going to call this 8th meeting of the Hamilton Township Zoning Hearing Board. The intent tonight is to render a decision on NOBPA's application for a variance and special exception. Real quickly, just to bring us all back around here, the applicant's requesting a variance to section 150-65A, as well as a special exception under 150-63M, which requires them to meet the standards for a special exception under 150-98-H of the Hamilton Township Zoning Board. Since we let, what?
It's D.
Oh, we have double H, double D. Should have remembered that. So where we left off, since the last meeting, the board's had a chance to meet with me, the solicitor, for legal advice.
Got a mic in the back.
No, bring it up. Don't promise what you can't deliver. There we go. Thanks. Since the last meeting, the zoning board has had an opportunity to meet with me as their solicitor on an executive session for legal advice. In addition, we've received findings of fact and conclusions of law, proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law from all the parties, the applicant, the township, and the objectors, which the board has had a chance to review and consider. Tonight, the only thing we're going to do is allow the parties to give brief closing arguments. My board will listen to those arguments. We may take a brief supplemental executive session for any additional legal advice, and then it's our intention to render a decision. So hopefully we'll be out of here in short order. Dustin, you wanted a chance to talk to the mic?
Yeah. So, sorry about that. The board got together, based upon the previous meetings that we've had and a lot of the input coming from the public. We noticed that there's a lot of information that you guys are asking that you're not receiving. And we're going to start off basically with letting you know who we are. So my name's Dusty Spielman. I'm the board chairman, and I've been a Hamilton Township resident for 27 years.
My name is Chris Newman, and I've been in the township for 38 years.
I'm Charlie Dietrich, and I've been in the township for 70 years.
So I'm going to go down through a couple of items here real quickly, just to make sure everybody understands just how this process works, because there seems to be some confusion regarding that as well. So as far as clarification, a zoning hearing board functions as a quasi-judicial body that ensures the fair application of zoning and land use regulations within a municipality. It handles appeals on decisions made by zoning officers, such as permit denials or notices of violation, and reviews applications for variances and special exceptions, which is what we're doing now. The board also addresses challenges to the validity of zoning ordinances and interprets their provisions. This system of checks and balances helps maintain impartiality and fairness in the local land use decisions. Everyone has the opportunity to speak their opinion on the situation at hand. Every applicant has the opportunity to present their information in an effort to receive approval, whether it is popular with the community or not. This is their time, which cannot be revoked by the zoning hearing board, and it will be their time until they close their submission. The zoning hearing board did not compose the zoning ordinance for the township. Your elected board of supervisors does this. When a zoning hearing meeting is scheduled, it is only to interpret zoning regulations long established by Hamilton Township. Meetings are established by the Hamilton Township Zoning Office when it is determined that an applicant needs to deviate from the zoning ordinance adopted by the Hamilton Township Board of Supervisors. As previously stated, we are volunteer members who give up our time to ensure the township ordinances are withheld by listening to the facts and opinions of the facts being presented to determine the best result for the township within the state and local laws. We understand there are times when applicants are going to create highly charged emotions, such as this one, but there is a due process which must be followed to a conclusion. The process is set forth by Hamilton Township and as required by the Pennsylvania state law. We want to thank all of you for attending these multiple marathon meetings, which have allowed applicants, objectors in Hamilton Township to present their cases. We appreciate the strong attendance, which shows the community's consensus regarding this and each situation. Please understand that anyone sitting in the audience tonight, as well as any Hamilton Township resident, would receive the same respect and consideration if the need for a variance or an exception on the Hamilton Township zoning ordinance were ever required. To close, we, the Zoning Hearing Board, encourage all residents to engage in township governance at the monthly supervisors meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, real quick closing arguments. Applicant can go first.
Good evening. On behalf of the applicant, NOBPA LLC, and Principal Gary Bolus, I'd like to first thank this board and its council for serving the community in what may often be a thankless job and providing the applicant with an opportunity to be heard. The decision of this board is not based upon any individual member of what that individual member wants or does not want to see a warehouse on the site. The decision of this board is also not based upon whether the dozens of citizens who have been sitting behind us through these, as he said, marathon hearings want to see a warehouse on this site. Certainly everybody in this room is entitled to his or her opinion on whether he or she wants to see a warehouse on the site. And many with opinions on the issue spoke directly to this board, either as witnesses on behalf of the objectors or in the public comment portion of the hearing. the applicant understands and respects all of those opinions. However, the matter before you, it's not about your opinion or anybody else's opinion. It's about whether or not the record has demonstrated that the applicant has satisfied the objective standards set forth in the zoning ordinance for a special exception and variance to be granted to allow for the warehouse as provided in the amended application. It is often said, as to the special exception, that a special exception is neither special nor an exception. Special exception is a use in which the governing body of the municipality is deemed acceptable within that zoning district. In this case, the Hamilton Township Board of Supervisors has already made a legislative determination that a warehouse on the subject property is permitted, provided that the applicant meet the objective, specific standards set forth in the zoning ordinance. If the application, as amended here, and the record created shows compliance with the objective, specific standards set forth in section 150-98DD of the zoning ordinance, this board is compelled and obligated to grant an approval. As set forth in our proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law, each of the criteria in that section of the zoning ordinance has been met. Without a doubt, the applicant has provided sound evidence to demonstrate compliance with section 150-98DD 1 through 10, 12, 13, and 16. Unless the board would like additional argument on those items, we stand on the record created in the proposed findings of fact and conclusions of law. The criteria that seems to be contested by the objectors and to some extent by the township is summarized below. First, number 11, that the truck and rail access operations shall not conflict with the convenience and safety of vehicular traffic and parking. Number 14 was the applicant shall provide traffic impact study prepared by a professional traffic engineer in accordance with the applicable provisions of the SALDO. And number 15, that a lighting plan shall be prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Hamilton Township lighting ordinance. As to number 11, this is hardly an objective or specific criteria. Shall not conflict with the convenience and safety. By permitting warehouses in the commercial district, the Township's Board of Supervisors, and in turn, the zoning ordinance acknowledges that a warehouse development will create additional truck traffic, which may be inconvenient to those living near or driving by the site. That's what warehouses do, but they're already permitted in this district by legislative decision. Given the subjectivity of this criteria, the question before this board is whether the objectors in this case have shown to a high degree of probability that the proposed use will generate adverse impacts not normally generated by this type of use, and those impacts will pose a substantial threat to the health and safety of the community. Precedential case law has held that to meet this burden, the objectors cannot rely upon bald assertions, personal opinion and perceptions, or merely speculate as to the probable harm. With the exception of the objector's traffic engineer, whose testimony we will discuss in a bit, all of the objector's testimony in the public comments was just that: assertions, personal opinions and perceptions, and speculation of probable harm. For the most part, we just heard complaints about the existing roadway conditions, for which bylaw cannot be the basis for the denial of a special exception. And certainly nothing presented by the objectors support the notion that the warehouse proposed in the amended application would generate any adverse impact not normally generated by a warehouse. Again, it goes without saying, warehouses, regardless of where they're located, will increase traffic. But the mere increase in traffic, especially where the warehouse fronts two already heavily traveled roads, does not in and of itself justify the denial of a special exception. We acknowledge that the objector's traffic engineer disagreed with our conclusion as to number 11. Mr. Naughn's testimony must be given the weight it deserves, which is not much. He testified that he's not prepared a traffic impact study in the past 10 years. He undermined his own testimony regarding the correct IT land use code to be used in the traffic impact study by agreeing that if a condition for approval was attached limiting the use of the property to a non-sort facility, that the applicant's TIS land use criteria was correct. And most shockingly, Mr. Yon disputed PennDOT's regulatory experience in such matters, claiming that he knows better than the hundreds of devoted career engineers whose job it is to prepare regulations and guidance for the safety of the Commonwealth. Very simply, Yon is not a credible expert witness. And to dispute the satisfaction proven by the applicant as to a 150-98-DD11. As to section 150-98-DD14, the applicant submitted 2 traffic impact studies, together with multiple regulatory supplementary studies, all of which were reviewed and commented upon by the township's engineer in a continuous conversation basically between the applicant's traffic engineer and the township traffic engineer to meet the concerns that the township's traffic engineer does have. Section 120-36B4 of the SALDO, for good reason, reads that a traffic impact study shall be prepared in accordance with the standard of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation and Institute of Transportation Engineers. That's the standard in which it was prepared, and to the extent that small technical details may have been omitted or need to be supplemented, that's why traffic impact studies go through multiple cycles. That's why we have comments received from them, and that's why those technical matters are usually saved for subdivision land development approval. Without a doubt, a traffic study in accordance with your ordinance was submitted and resubmitted after comments from the township's engineer. Finally, the lighting plan. I think this is a red herring that the objectors want to present to you. A lighting plan meeting the township SALDO requirements was submitted during the March hearing. And no objections were made to that lighting plan then. It was reviewed by the township engineer as well. No comments were made as far at that time as well. We do acknowledge that a second lighting plan was submitted to the zoning board at a more recent hearing that did not meet all of those standards. However, the lighting plan that was already submitted did meet those standards and provided to you the information that you needed in order to make this decision. So, as we said, we meet all of the standards for special exception, and the record speaks for itself as to the variance, and we stand on our proposed findings of fact, conclusions of law. And thank you again for all of your time in this matter.
Township, objectors, you good? Go ahead, 5 minutes,
I'll stay with 5 minutes.
starting now.
Good evening, board members. I'm going to echo one thing that Mr. Schutte said, and that is thank you. It is a thankless job, but tonight we want to acknowledge the fact that you have put in an inordinate amount of work in getting to this point. We appreciate your patience. You have to decide whether the applicant has convinced you that it met the ordinance requirements to approve this special exception. That's their burden. We've pointed out to you 5 main areas of deficiencies: buffering and screening, on-site repairs, truck staging plan, lighting plan, and traffic impact study. Any one of those deficiencies is enough to justify a denial of the plan. The township agrees in their findings that the staging plan, lighting plan, and traffic impact study are deficient, and it agrees that application should be denied on that basis. Let's look at the 2 big ones. The lighting plan, Exhibit 33 was presented to you in October. It was presented to you as a result of the applicant's request to amend its application. It changed its site plan, it changed its lighting plan, and it submitted a new traffic study. These weren't supplements to what they got earlier, these were replacements. Exhibit 33, in the findings of fact that the applicant submits, says, you know what, we already had Exhibit 9 on the record, it's a supplement. That's how you look at credibility. Because you look back to the transcript, and Mr. Schutte asked Mr. Brinzer, is the lighting plan, Exhibit 33, Does it satisfy the ordinance requirements? He said, yes, I believe it does. He didn't say in supplement or in conjunction with Exhibit 9. He said, yes, I believe it does. It stands on its own. They wanted to bring in a third version of the lighting plan to correct those deficiencies because it didn't meet the requirements. And you properly denied that request. The saldo tells you how to do a traffic study. It includes specific requirements for traffic studies. All intersections within 1/2 mile must be studied. Theirs does not. This requirement clearly applies unless the Board of Supervisors gives them permission to do otherwise. The applicant's engineers didn't read that ordinance. Instead, they relied on their PennDOT scoping submission to try to satisfy the saldo. Now, when questioned on that deficiency, they want to say, well, we relied on the traffic engineer from the township who was part of the scoping. But only the Board of Supervisors could authorize something less than required by the saldo. Brookview Solar versus Mount Joy Township Board of Supervisors is a 2023 decision from the Commonwealth Court that says, Judge George's words, when he was upheld and affirmed on appeal, he said you can't rely on what a staff member tells you that's in contravention of the ordinance. If there's clear ordinance language, you have to follow it. And your non-compliance isn't excused because an engineer or a zoning officer told you differently. You are held to that standard in the ordinance. They don't comply. As to the land use code, this applicant is proposing a massive warehouse without identifying a tenant or an end user. That's a speculative use. Our expert traffic engineer told you what to do when you don't know who will occupy the building, so you can be sure any road improvements are able to handle the traffic that's generated from any use of that building. Without that information right now, that's impossible. And a PennDOT strike-off letter is not a regulation. Paragraph 48 of the applicant's findings says Mr. Schick was admitted as a traffic engineering expert. That's misleading at best. He was admitted as an expert in traffic because he is not a licensed engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And his traffic impact study fails to include the information that actually accepts Land Use Code 150. Now, they say that we can fix it with a condition that limits what kind of land use code we can have our use fit within. But what they didn't include in that was to include Land Use Code 156. Even if it's the 155 non-sort, 156 would be double the number of trips that their study proposed would occur. The traffic study doesn't meet the saldo requirements, it doesn't give you enough information to be reliable, and it's a basis for denial. Conditions can't be attached to a deficient application. Conditions are designed to mitigate impacts of an application that already meets the criteria. You have to decide if the application is deficient. We submit we've given you enough to do that. But remember, you can't fix a deficient application with conditions. Lastly, on the variance, I'll be very brief. The applicant's squeezing as much as they can onto the site. Those two restaurant lots comprise approximately 6 acres that could be used for parking, staging, whatever they want to do. But they're trying to use it for something else that prevents them from moving it closer to Route 30. But you know, they could make a smaller building. They could just not do it at all. Those decisions that they've made as to how to configure it is a self-created hardship. And for that reason, the variance should be denied. The applicant had a burden. It failed to meet that burden. The burden never shifts to the objectors as to the type of effect it's going to have. But as a result of not meeting their burden, what's really critical is they're not entitled to the presumption that their use is consistent with the health, safety, and welfare. Deny the special exception, deny the variance, tell NOBPA no. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I promise I will keep this brief. The township's interest here is a little bit different. The township's interest here is in ensuring, to the extent it can, adherence to its ordinance requirements. and that the health, safety, and welfare of its residents is protected the best it can be. The township here is the entity that enacted the ordinance that provides that this use can be permitted in this zone. Township's not denying that, it's not going to try to change that through this proceeding, but it's only permitted if it meets specific criteria. It's up to the board to decide whether this application meets those criteria. It's not up to the township. Now, as you saw in the township's proposed findings, from what the township sees, there are criteria that were not met. This particular application, this plan, were defective in certain ways. Some more important than others, and you've heard a lot about all of those. On that basis, the township believes that this board can legally deny this application. However, the board might disagree with the township. And if the board disagrees with the township and approves this application, the township still wants to ensure that the health, safety, and welfare of its residents is protected to the extent it can. And in that regard, the township submitted proposed conditions that it would ask that the board impose should it grant the application. Those conditions are based on the testimony primarily of the township engineer and of the other experts here that have testified that show that these conditions at least will mitigate any negative impact. It'll make it better. It might not be perfect, but it will make it better. And so in that regard, should the board decide to grant this application, the township requests those specific conditions that the applicant agreed to be imposed. And with that, township leaves it in your hands. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, take 2 minutes. We'll be right back.
The hard part is when it's like leaving us. She had a previous experience where she is across her 3 issues and other Sunday, the day she was done, so I stayed at my house, and they were I finished it, and go my last snap,
All right, again, we have two requests by the applicant. The first is the request for a variance under section 150-65-A. Is there a motion?
I'm making a motion to deny the variance because it does not meet the requirements of the variance because the applicant has not proved that there is a hardship.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
3-0 to deny the applicant's request for a variance. With respect to the special exception request under 150-63M, where the applicant's required to meet all the sections of 150-98DD, is there a motion?
I make the motion to deny the request for the special exception as it does not meet the requirements for a special exception under the section 150-98DD.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's a vote 3-0 to deny the applicant's request for a special exception. Now, I have 45 days to render the formal decision and deliver it to the applicant and all objectors, as well as the township. From that point, upon receipt of that written findings of fact and conclusions of law, any aggrieved party would have the right to appeal to the Court of Common Pleas within 30 days. With that, this hearing is concluded.